So today we're going to talk about the Chamber changes that are upcoming and also do a little meta tier list as well, because I need to do one since, we got the Jets over, Neon changes, obviously the introduction of Fade as well, and then Chamber as well. So we're going to do a little meta tier list after that as well. But for those of you who aren't aware that Chamber is changing, you might be a bit surprised and taken aback by that. Let's talk about what the changes are, because we already know, and they are coming for 4.09 that has been confirmed, and so we'll get into that. But here are the changes. The trademark charges going from 2 to 1, the cost is increasing from 150 to 200, and they're increasing the volume a bit. Now these two I don't think people cared about too much, and I think in general most people thought that a nerf to Chamber was coming, but this one, the trademarks going from 2 to 1, there has been a lot of negative reaction from people, and you yourself might be feeling like, whoa, what are they doing? Why on earth would they do that to a Sentinel? And there was a lot of that reaction, and so the devs actually did an AMA 2 days ago, and this question was asked, like, after the community's response, is the plan still to nerf Chamber, taking away one of his trips? And as you can see, response from a Riot Dev Peng with Valorant here, they say that yes, the plan is still to remove one of the traps for 4.09. We'll still be monitoring how he performs on defense to make sure he's still a powerful defensive agent, and will adjust if necessary in the future. We believe there are many ways Sentinels can control and defend space, whether it's through the use of reactive slow abilities like Sage, flank watching gadgets like Cypher, or defensively oriented movement abilities and weapons like Chamber. We specifically wanted to keep the unique parts of Chamber strong while sharpening Chamber's weakness compared to the other trap-oriented Sentinels. And so there was a bunch of negative comments like this one here, and there has been just a bunch of negative feedback in general, like why would you push him further away from the Sentinel role? Why would you remove a trip entirely? This is a big mistake, and I'm disappointed that they're not, they're ignoring the feedback and all of that from even pro players as well, right? How could you just ignore that feedback? But the thing is, I'm totally with Riot on this change. I think it's a really good change. Let me explain why. And it starts really with the fact that they gave us their blueprint for what they see the Sentinel role as a whole. And I think that this is something you need to get into your head, that they literally spelled out for us here what the Sentinel role is to them, but people aren't taking that into consideration. I think a lot of people see the Sentinel role as one thing, and that is, if you are a Sentinel, you have to have some kind of passive information utility. That makes you a Sentinel, okay? But that is just not true. One, Sage doesn't really fit into that anyway, but secondly, that doesn't have to be the case. And they said here, there is 3 basically different ways that you can be a Sentinel. You can have reactive slow abilities like Sage, you can have flank watching gadgets, which is what everyone thinks that a Sentinel is, it seems, or you can have defensively oriented movement abilities and weapons like Chamber, okay? So they see that the Sentinel class is actually 3 different spaces rather than just one. And I think that that is what people can't accept, is that they're getting tied to this idea of Sentinel means that you have some kind of trap that, tells you where they are and maybe slows them down a bit. I think that that is what people think that Sentinel must mean, but it obviously doesn't. And so one reason that I really, really love this change is because it takes Chamber away from Cypher and Killjoy. Cypher and Killjoy were going to have a problem with Chamber, that basically it's what I talked about in the Duelist, Riot's Duelist problem video, that with an agent like Phoenix, and when you have like Skye and KO, they're just cannibalizing each other. You can't just buff Phoenix to the moon, because then he'll just see play over Skye and KO. They're too similar in their design space to warrant picking in certain areas, okay? And so it doesn't matter which one's stronger or weaker, because people just won't pick the one that's weaker because their design is too similar, okay? And the thing is, that I think was going to be true for Cypher, Killjoy, and Chamber as well. You can buff Cypher to the moon and nerf Chamber to the ground if you want, and people will just pick Cypher and not pick Chamber. And now you again have an agent that no one is going to pick. But by doing this change instead, by taking away one of his trips, you remove him from that design space. You give Chamber his own design space in the game, which is a great thing, because you have to think about long term as well. Riot needs to design some more agents. They need to have enough space to keep putting in new agents in the game and make sure that they aren't cannibalizing each other to the point where, there is no point in picking a certain agent because they're just a weaker version of another agent, okay? And so by changing that design space that Chamber exists in is actually a very, very healthy thing for the game. And another thing you have to consider as well is that it has been proven in this game that if you have a character who on the defensive side can hold an operator, kill someone, teleport away or get away somehow for free and, not die on a trade or something like that, that is an incredibly powerful thing to have in this game, okay? And that alone, between his ult and that ability to rendezvous out, teleport away, that is enough to carry Chamber. And I think that that is what they realized. Like, that's good enough already, right? So there's no reason to have this agent be super good in every other area. Let's make him weak in those other areas, because we want this agent to be that. We know that that's a really strong ability, to hold an operator, hold an angle, get a kill, teleport away, and then, you know, re-peek an angle with your operator or whatever. They know that that is really strong, and that can carry Chamber anyway. A lot of things that I think people aren't thinking about is, you're still going to pick Chamber on a lot of maps. You know, I know that everyone's saying this is some crazy nerf, and it is a pretty big nerf, but people are still going to pick Chamber. He's still going to see play on Breeze. He's still going to see play on Icebox. I can guarantee it. Optic will still pick him on Bind. I guarantee that Yale will say, it's still fine. I'll just still play it on Bind. Yeah, sure. It's worth it for me to still play it on Bind. Of course he will. And that's the thing. This agent will still be good on certain maps. You'll still see a lot of play on certain maps. But what it's going to do is force people to be like, well, do we need an extra Sentinel as well? Now there's a downside to picking Chamber. Right now there is no downside to picking Chamber. And if you did some of the changes that people are saying, like reduce the trip slow field time, that isn't going to make people not pick Chamber. Okay, that wouldn't do anything. This actually does, and it creates a unique space for Chamber to exist, allowing the other Sentinels to flourish as well in their own space. I think it's a really great change. And so let's move on from the Chamber discussion now and come to a meta tier list. And so what we're going to do is we are going to keep that Chamber change in mind, because it's been confirmed that it's coming, and obviously we have all the jet changes and Sova changes and whatnot to talk about as well. And so let's get into this meta tier list. Now I'll quickly go through what I think each tier represents. S tier to me is like, you probably need a slight nerf. A and B is like a healthy state. C is maybe a slight buff. D is like a big buff, right? So that's kind of what I'm seeing for each tier here. And so let's just start. And so let's begin, and we'll start with Astra. And to me, Astra is kind of in that space where she's like okay, a bit meh, maybe a bit worse than some of the other controllers out there. And so I think I'm going to put her at the top of C tier. You know, there has been some use of Astra, but I think a slight buff to maybe some of the cooldowns would be a good change overall. And so now let's come to Brim. Brim is like your classic B tier agent, I think. He's solid on Bind, solid on Fracture. And then, you know, maybe he's okay on other maps, but he has two very clear home maps, and I think he's just, you know, he's fine. Then Omen, I think, you know, has proved himself that both Haven, Ascent, Split as well, you know, are all like solid Omen maps. It's some Icebox in there as well. I think that makes you an A tier agent when you know, you have three solid home maps, and then some play on some others. I think that makes Omen an A tier agent, and he's pretty decent. And then Viper, I think, again, you know, Breeze and Icebox obviously are absolute locks, and then you have like some play on Bind, well, quite a bit of play on Bind, and then also some play on Split as well. I think Viper is a pretty solid high B tier agent. Now let's come to the duelists, and obviously our first big discussion is Jett. Where on earth would you put Jett? Is she still S tier like she was? Is she now A tier? I still think that a lot of people will pick Jett after the changes. I still think that, you know, on Ascent, Haven, Breeze, Icebox, that, you know, those four maps in particular, a lot of people will still pick Jett, just because they have a comfort level with Jett. But obviously I do expect the nerf to make a big deal, and I think that I'll put Jett at the top of A for now. She could still be an S tier, which to me would mean that she again would need another nerf, but for now I'm going to put her in A tier. I think that she's perhaps okay there. Neon. Neon is super interesting, because in my mind they actually nerfed Neon with these changes in terms of like the time that you're actually allowed to sprint now being a lot less, in terms of the wall not doing damage. I actually think that is a nerf to Neon as well, just like a psychological thing, if not anything else. But yeah, I think that they nerfed Neon, and I would have put Neon in the B tier before, but actually now I'm going to put Neon in the C tier, because I think she needs those slight buffs back, which was a big shame, because Neon I feel like was always waiting for the Jett nerf, and so it's a shame that they like kind of inadvertently, I think, nerfed her as well. Phoenix is D tier, we don't need to talk about that. Raze, obviously a very good pick on Bind, Split, and Fracture as well. Like, again, kind of three home maps, and we have seen some experimentation. I'm going to put Raze also in the A tier. I think she's doing pretty well. Reyna is an interesting one. Reyna almost doesn't belong on the list, because for ranked she's like A tier, but for pro play she's like D tier, so just keep that in mind, that like, you know, like, yeah, she's coming down here. She's definitely better than Phoenix, but yeah, let's be real. Yoru I'm going to put at the bottom of C tier, I think. Again, I think that Yoru could use with some buffs. I still think that there's like something stopping people from playing Yoru, and I think it is more than just like people getting used to it. I think that Yoru does need something more to just kind of, you know, make sure that he's a worthy agent to play. It could even be things like, you know, like making the ult animations, you know, quicker and things like that, or just the animations slightly quicker in general, right? Like something like that I think would be a big help for Yoru. Breach is like your classic B tier agent. I can't even, like, there's not even much to say. He just is a classic B tier agent overall. Fade. Okay, really interesting one, right? The new agent. Where does the new agent go? I'm going to put Fade in the bottom of A tier, I think. But I wouldn't be surprised if she ended up at the top of A tier, or maybe anywhere in B tier as well. I think she exists somewhere in this space. From what I've seen of her and, you know, what I've experienced of Fade so far myself. But well, if you ask me in a couple of weeks, you know, I mean, I wouldn't even be shocked maybe if, you know, someone found some super crazy combos that maybe she could be an S tier. But I expect her to probably live within this kind of A to B tier, but we'll see. KO. KO might be, spoiler alert, the one agent that I think actually might need a nerf later down the line, but I'm gonna put him for now in the top of A tier, but he very easily could be an S tier. I think that KO is super good. Remember, I think that S tier means you need a nerf, and I'm kind of on the fence with KO. I could very easily see that should be a possibility and might be a possibility long term, but for now I'll put him in the top of A tier. Skye, a decent agent again. I think she's definitely an A tier agent. I will put her below Jet and Raze because I don't think she has as many, like, this is clearly your map. You know, Bind is a very clear Skye map, but other than that, I think she's a bit more of a flex pick that you can make work on other maps. So I'll put her in A tier for now. She's a very solid agent though. Sova as well, very, very interesting one. I'm gonna put Sova, I think, at the bottom of A tier after his changes. I think that his changes were pretty good. I think that they, you know, hit the mark in terms of, like, getting the right level of changes on Sova. I think that now, you know, you could make an argument that he's still maybe higher up in A tier. We'll see. You could make an argument that he's actually in B tier, I think, as well. I know different people have different opinions on that. But I think that the changes they made overall were pretty good. Maybe let's bump him up a bit. Let's get him next to Skye. Then we come to Chamber, the man who will get nerfed. What will Chamber be like after his changes? Well, I think he'll be an interesting pick, right? And I think we will see more double Sentinel comps in general, because that one trap I don't think people will rely on enough to, you know, give them that protection that they want. And so that will make Chamber a very interesting pick. He will always kind of be a fifth option, right? Like, you've got one of each of the other class, and then maybe Chamber is your fifth, which I think will be a super interesting option. Again, I just really like the change. But where on earth does he go after that change? Because it is a pretty significant nerf, but I still think if you're a character who can op and play aggressive angles like that, I still think you have something. I've always been a bit of a kind of Chamber doubter in general, and not liking Chamber as much as other people, but he is very strong. So I'm gonna put Chamber, let's put him at the bottom of A tier as well. Cypher, I think, is definitely a C tier agent. I think we know that he is getting some kind of slight buff, so I think that is a good thing on the whole. Killjoy, I think, is a bit better than that. I'm not sure Killjoy needs buffs necessarily. I think Killjoy is okay. I'll put her at the bottom of B tier for now. And the same I could say for Sage also, that Sage is like a classic low B tier option overall. In that Sage, you know, has like a decent pick rate on some maps, but doesn't see, like, you know, great win rates really anywhere. I think that this is a solid place for both of those agents. And yeah, that's my tier list. So what I'm saying with this tier list essentially is I think that the game is going to be pretty balanced. That there are some agents that might need buffing. Reyna, again, you can basically take off this list because she exists in such a weird space. So kind of forget Reyna. She's a weird agent to kind of put on these lists anyway. But, you know, this is what I would see, that you could slightly buff these four. Phoenix obviously needs a lot of work, but everyone else is kind of okay right now. And I think that that's going to lead to a very interesting, healthy meta, because I still think actually these four are still worthy of being picked on certain maps. So, you know, if you're only looking at like a place where only two of your agents aren't seeing play, and one of them kind of doesn't count because she sees so much rank play anyway, it's probably fine. You know, you only have one agent to really worry about. I think that puts Riot in a pretty good place.